Good morning, my fellow yoga travelers. I'm mighty glad to be alive today, and I hope that you are too as we continue to live, laugh, love, learn, linger, live the life we love. Today is Thursday, so it's story day. But first, I just want to remind myself that every day I try to clear my mind of any kind of resentment and condemnation because I know that my thoughts are the only thing that I have to treat. My thoughts are the cause, and my experience is the effect. I've tried to understand the phrase to be poor in spirit, which means supposedly emptying oneself of all desire to exercise personal self-will, like it says in the Gospels, not my will, but thy will. Very difficult in an ego-oriented culture like ours, right? But what's most important is to have renounced all preconceived ideas and opinions about what spirit is as I go about my wholehearted search for spirit, willing to set aside my own prejudices, my own views, my own way of life, even. I got to jettison it. In fact, anything and everything that keeps me from spirit or keeps me a slave to something other than spirit, I want to get rid of that. I don't want anything to stand in the way between my connection to spirit, even if it's just a romance in my own imagination. I tell a better story than what I see going out in the world. So I'm ready to start again at the very beginning and learn anew, because the study and research I do on myself is really practical. So I accept the fact that the key to harmony is in my hand right now by my present thoughts. And I hope I can empty enough to be a channel, a switch through which spirit can flow. Sometimes you can't get it through the left brain, so a story is great. This is called Fatima the Spinner. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Fatima who was born to a family of prosperous spinners. And when she was an adolescent, that time, her father said, listen, I have business in the Isles of the Middle Sea. Why don't you come with me? Because you might meet a youth in a good situation who you could take as a husband. I guess these were the days when a woman was defined by her marriage and the dowry that she could give. So off she went, sailing the Isles of Crete. But even though she was thinking about the husband who was one day might be hers and what would happen, a storm blew up. In fact, it was a monster storm and shipwrecked everybody. And everyone, including her father, was killed. And if it wasn't for her holding on to a piece of wreckage, she would have died as well. And so happens that her body got washed up on the sea shore by Alexandria in Egypt. And although she was physically almost dead and psychologically exhausted, she was found by a family of weavers who took her in and continued to raise her as one of their own. And in a year or two, she was reconciled to her lot. I don't know if I would say she was happy. And now the second life began for her, and she learned some new skills, weaving, after having learned how to be a spinner. Well, one day, for some reason, when she was on the beach, she and her friends were abducted, kidnapped by a band of slavers, pirates, who took her off to Istanbul to sell as a slave. Now her world collapsed for the second time. Well, when she was at the slave market, there was a man there who saw the dejected look on her face and thought, maybe if I buy her as a serving maid for my wife, she'll have a better existence than if she became a sex slave or who knows what. And that's what he did. So he took her back, and this man happened to be in the business of making ships' masts. But when he arrived home, he found out that his whole fortune was pirated, lost at sea. And so he had to fire everybody else in the woodyard, leaving only him, his wife, and Fatima at the job of making ships' masts. Well, she worked so hard and so well that in the course of a year or two, he said, listen, you're not my slave, you're my partner. And so now a third life began for her. And after a short time or a long time, whatever time it takes in these stories, he said to her, listen, I have a cargo of ship's masts. I'd like you to go to Java and take him as my agent. No problem. Maybe she didn't understand that her karma with the sea was not so good, but off she went. And when she was off the coast of China, a typhoon, like a hurricane, it came about. And once again, everybody except Fatima was drowned at sea. And she was thrust up onto the Chinese seashore, where she couldn't believe this is what her life was. She just looked up at the sky and said, why? Why does it seem that every time my life gets together, something happens to ruin it? Why? But there was no answer. Now, when she stumbled into a town by the Chinese seashore, what she didn't know was that there was a prophecy in China that said at that time there were no tents in China. And one day a foreign woman would come and teach the emperor of China how to make a tent. And it just so happened that this was one of those times. And every year, the emperor would send heralds throughout the kingdom to find out was there any foreign woman who knew how to make a tent. And the coincidence was unbelievable. They spoke to her through an interpreter, and they brought her to the emperor. And the emperor said, lady, can you make a tent? And she said, I think so. He says, well, I'm the emperor of China. I have everything you need. What do you need? He said, well, we need some tent cloth. Said, we don't have anything like that. So remembering her life as a spinner, she gathered some flax and made some tent cloth. Then she said, well, we need some rope to tie it down. So we don't have anything like that. So remembering her life with the weavers of Alexandria, she gathered some material and she made rope out of it to tie the tent flaps down. Then she said, well, we also need some tent poles. He said, well, we don't have anything like that. So remembering her life with the wood fashioner of Istanbul, she took wood, she made tent poles, cunningly made some tent poles. And then she racked her brains for all the things she's seen in the travel, and lo, a tent was made. When the emperor of China saw this marvel, he said, that is unbelievable, fantastic. You can have anything you want. What do you want? Well, she chose to marry a handsome young prince. She stayed in splendor and wealth, surrounded by her children and grandchildren for the rest of her life. So the moral of the story is what seemed to be an unfortunate or even tragic incident at one part of her life turned out to be an essential ingredient in the making of her ultimate happiness. What seemed to be an unfortunate, tragic event at one portion of her life turned out to be an essential ingredient in the making of her ultimate happiness. I hope we all get the point.